Hi, everybody. I am Jamie Gravel. I am the social media strategist for the International Literacy Association. Thank you all for bearing with us for the last 9 minutes, and thank you all for joining us for the Google Hangout with Donalyn Miller and Teri Lesesne. Tonight, they are going to share their personal experiences as readers, parents, grandparents, teachers, librarians, and they're going to suggest ways to spark your students' reading engagement. And of course, what you're probably most excited about is you have the opportunity to win signed books. Donalyn and Teri are going to take questions later, so make sure you tweet to us using hashtag ILA Hangout. Unfortunately, we have Donalyn with us live, and Teri is on the phone. They are both available. They're going to be speaking to one another. They're going to be taking questions and, as always, bouncing ideas off of each other. Since we now only have 50 minutes because of our technical issue, I am very excited to hand this over to Donalyn and Teri.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, everybody.
Can you hear Teri? So I think it's a little funny that I'm sitting here talking to the disembodied voice of Teri Lesesne, because often it's her voice that I hear in my head throughout the day as I'm reading things and looking at different things on the internet that relate to reading and teaching. And I always wonder, I wonder what Teri would think of these things. So you get to hear her voice in your head for a little bit of time too.
And this is not uncommon for Donalyn and me to be talking to one another via, in my case, fancy phone, while I'm trying to figure out whatever it is that I did wrong in order to join in with the rest of the talk. But it's okay. We'll make this work. And I can see Donalyn now. Yay, she can't see me, but I can.
Oh, no, I don't know that that's a good thing. You know, I think one of the things that we want to talk about tonight is, of course, how we can engage our students with reading. But the number one way that we know, and that research tells us over and over again, that teachers can engage their students with reading is by being engaged with reading themselves. You know, Jim Trelease joked a long time ago, you can't catch a cold or a love of reading from someone who has neither. And we know that one of the best ways to spark our students' interest in reading is for us to be enthusiastic about that too. So what does that look like? What does that link between getting ourselves inspired and excited about reading and teaching, and how does that work in transferring that love and interest to our students, is certainly something that we know you're interested in and that we are continuously talking about.
Yeah, and you know, that it is a kind of you know, the contagion element, I think, is kind of interesting. It's not a matter of I see and you read. It's a matter of I read and you read. I share books with you, you share books with me, all that good stuff like that. So, you know, we're gonna kind of talk about some of that stuff tonight, I think.
And, you know, Teri and I we're working on a book together, which gives us an excuse to call each other just about every day. We always know that those phone calls will be at least an hour long. Our husbands know, they're just used to it. They're like, oh, who are you on the phone with? Oh, it's Teri. They know not to come back for an hour. And when they told us that we had an hour to talk live in front of everyone, I thought, how much will that be like our actual phone conversations? And how much should we edit compared to our real phone conversations that we have? So we will not bore you with discussions of our pets, although that always comes up when we are talking to each other on the phone. One thing Teri and I have in common is that both of us have pets that are named after book characters. So that probably puts us in a club of a special elite nerddom, you know, and people that name their pets after book characters. But we won't tell you about their antics. You know, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot in the past year is the way that we depend so much on a foundation of best practices that really guides our teaching. And Teri and I started a chat last year called BP Roots Chat, which is Best Practices Roots, to kind of bring back out some of those articles that are in the common domain now, articles that have been foundational in the understanding of teaching reading and literacy, and to share those with people. And as we're revisiting these, you know, there's a part of you that is a little dismayed because you feel like if this information about reading instruction has been around for so long, how is it not commonly implemented? But then there's another piece where you say, you know, isn't it great that we have a body of research that stretches back a century, that stretches back half a century, that can really be a compass for all of us in guiding our reading instruction?
And, you know, as Donalyn and I were talking about this particular hangout, but also as we chat about BP Roots, one of the things we talk about, Donalyn, I know you said this often, is that our foundational principles are really important to us. That's what drives our profession, and not knowing those roots, if you will, is what makes us vulnerable. I really liked that phrase when we were talking earlier. It makes us vulnerable because when someone comes in then and says, "Here's a new whiz bang," and we want to say, but reading aloud, we need to be able to say, let me share with you the 100 or so years of the research on reading aloud and why that's still an effective tool or strategy or activity, however you want to deem that we need to be using in our classrooms. So that was part of the reason behind starting the BP Roots chat, but it's also part of what we do anyhow. We share with one another the older research, the newer research as well, that continues to support that pedagogy.
And, you know, Teri, we talked a lot about, you know, how important is that body of research as teachers, and how to really see ourselves as professionals, we have to continue to remain current and engaged in what research is telling us about reading instruction. We joked today, I think, was it Richard Allington's Every Child, Every Day? We said, which has been around for a long time, and you know, participants could certainly Google that and find it if you've not read it already. But we felt like if everyone just did what Richard Allington asked us to do in Every Child, Every Day, we would see an improvement in the level of literacy instruction that children receive. And also teachers would have some confidence in what they knew children needed to be doing every day. Are there other pieces that you feel like have been really foundational to your practice, or that you really feel like would be vital for other teachers to read and share and discuss?
Well, you know, we keep coming back to that Allington piece, Every Child, Every Day, a Reader, and talking about it kind of as our moral compass as teachers, that we've known this from research for years and years and years, that there are certain things that we can do, certain things we need to make sure are in place for our kids every single day as a teacher. And that hasn't changed over quite a few years. And so, you know, that is, I think, just an incredible piece. But you and I have also talked, Donalyn, about going back and looking even earlier than the Allington piece, looking at Daniel Fader's Hooked on Books.
Well,
looking at, go ahead.
Well, Daniel Fader, Hooked on Books in the late 50s, that found that the way to disengage teenagers with reading was to give them choices in what they could read, and to use trade literature in the classroom instead of just the anthology. You know, we can go back and as I said, you know, there may be some of us who are a little disheartened and saying, what, we've been talking about this for 60 years and we still don't have these practices in place. But for me, it provides me some comfort in saying, yes, you know, we have studied quite a few things over the years in relation to literacy instruction, but some of these things, giving kids choice, access to books, reading role models as teachers and as parents, we see in study after study actually does remain a robust way of engaging kids with reading. And so I take some confidence in that. I also feel like for me as a teacher, you know, fads come and go. Administrators bring in the latest, greatest, like you said, whiz bang, shiny new program. And we as teachers often are really pressured to adopt those programs because they're research based. But, you know, if we understand what the research is really telling us, that children need to read aloud, that conferring is a vital piece of reading and writing workshop, that kids need choices in what they read and what they write in order to remain engaged, we can look at those programs with some scrutiny and some confidence and say, you know, okay, if this is research-based, where's the research? And also, where's the read alouds? Where's the conferring? Where's the trade literature? Where's the choice? It just makes us, as you said, less vulnerable less vulnerable to those fads and trends that may drive us away from that compass. I also think being members of a professional organization is vital for us to continue to grow as professionals. And, I'm kind of a joiner. I think I'm a member of everything. I think I'm an ILA member, an NCTE member, an American Library Association member, an ASCD member. I guess I'm kind of a joiner. But I'm afraid.
But an active participant, and I think that makes a difference as well.
No, it's what our friend Kristen Zemke, the phrase she taught us, FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out. That's why I'm a member of all those organizations. I know they're doing great things. I want to stay on top of information, and I feel like if I'm not staying up on those things, but I don't expect everybody else to feel that pressure. But I think because that's self-imposed. But I think being the member of one good professional organization, whether you're a librarian or a principal or a teacher, is vital because there's so much support there. There's so much solidarity. It's not just about the yearly conference. It's about getting the emails and seeing what the trends are going on in the profession. I feel like I can stay at the top of my game because of that information.
Exactly. To be able, and in some ways it's almost, I don't know, it's a building kind of process where we take what we know already and we continue to add other elements to it. We know that a best practice is conferring, but how can we best confer with kids? Are there some questions that we can ask that maybe we haven't been asking? Do we turn control over to students, which was something that Teri talked about in the 70s, when he said, what good does it do for us to talk about books if we're doing all the talking and the kids are just going, yeah, no, I guess. And so he talked about turning the lead over to kids. And so how does that play in? How do we use close reading in the kind of approach we want to take to reading? So how do we build this so that we have the model that works for us in the classroom? And that classroom, by the way, and Donalyn will attest to this, that those classrooms stretch from kindergarten all the way up to grad school, because we don't eliminate choice when we get to grad school. We don't eliminate conferring, things like that.
Well, you bring up a good point in that I just talked with a group last week in North Dakota, and I said, we were talking about conferring, and I said, we share the pedagogy, but we can't throw out the pedagogy because we struggle with the classroom management pieces, which is always the reason why people are not doing some of those things. And it's not that or there's administrative pressure. I hear that from teachers a lot, but for teachers who understand they need to confer with their kids, they're trying to wrap their heads around things like, how do I get to every kid every week? What am I writing down in notes? So it's those logistical things, those management things that present our obstacles. It's not the pedagogy as much, so if we believe in the belief, then we have to figure out how to get the management pieces to work for us. I joke that I used to, in my early years of teaching, I conferred because Lucy Calkins and Nancy Atwell told me to. I read their books. And they said, you must confer. And I went, okay. And I went off, and it was terrible, but it was because I didn't give myself grace and in the learning curve. And I also didn't say, okay, you know what, if I believe in this, Nancy Atwell is probably not coming to Texas to come confer with my kids. So I need to figure this out for myself. And how can I make this good practice work for me with my students and the time constraints and other obstacles that I might have? I think those are the questions we have to ask ourselves as teachers. It's not about channeling someone else. It's about recognizing the value in a shared belief system based on best practices, and then figuring out how to make that work for ourselves. You and I talked a lot recently about what we call now, paradigm drift. We talk a lot about paradigm shift in our profession. We need to change our paradigms to something more progressive and forward thinking. But what I see a lot is paradigm drift. We know what we're supposed to be doing, but because of the nature of school, the nature of the challenges that we face in regards to testing and administrative pressure and parents, and the challenge of just having children in the room, we find ourselves making slow incremental compromises that move us away from our core beliefs. And that's why I think that research foundation, professional organizations, and just also recognizing that foundation of best practices is flexible, that we can find space for ourselves, and it is key.
Exactly. Instead of abandoning, and again, it's that piecing together. Sometimes when the new stuff comes along, we kind of abandon something, and then we realize, no, that still needs to be part of the core value, if you will. I kind of like that idea. We have some core values that reading aloud is important, independent reading is important, conferring with kids is important, choice is important. And certainly, you and I talk about that a lot, no matter how many times during a week that comes up again and again and again, because those are foundational pieces, and we need to always kind of keep an eye on what the foundation is. And kind of going back to what you said about Atwell and Reef and some of those early folks, when I read them, I went, but I'm not Nancy Atwell. And then I gave myself permission to say, and that's okay. Because a lot of people will say, well, I'm not you. I can't, that's not my personality in front of a group. And that's good, because if it was all just like you and me, oh my goodness, that wouldn't be very good either. So, I like this idea that we pull in and we make work for us, those foundational elements, and then, we kind of figure it out as we go along. That's the sad thing to say, that after 25 years, I'm still figuring things out. But aside from how to be a good role model, I think I've got that one down. But aside from that, I think I'm still figuring out some of the other stuff.
Yeah, but I hope to never figure. I mean, there's so much to figure out when it comes to teaching and learning in kids. Like, if we ever get to a place where we say, "Oh, I've got it all figured out," we should probably fade off into the sunset somewhere. I mean, because that I will tell you as a learner, and you know that about me already, Teri, is that my biggest fear as a learner is complacency, apathy. I think that's why I changed schools 3 times in a decade. I think that's why I'm always pushing myself to read so much, is because I don't want my brain to go stale. I fear that. And it's a powerful lure to say, okay, I've got some things figured out. I don't need to push myself so hard anymore. It's like, my mom used to call me on Sundays and she would say, "What are you doing?" And I would say, "Writing lesson plans." And she would say, "Haven't you been teaching the same grade for 5 years? Why are you still starting over with lesson plans every Sunday? And can't you just use some of the old ones?" And I used to tell her, "Well, Mom, do you really want teachers who just recycle lesson plans they taught 5 years ago without being reflective?" Now, that doesn't mean I didn't do some of the same activities with my students every year because I knew they worked, or read the same books. I mean, really, can you ever read Al Moon too many times with a class of kids? But that doesn't mean that we can get in a place where we can just say, okay, yeah, I've got it all figured out, or I'm going to be afraid of new learning. That learning, we want our students to push themselves and try new things and take risks, and we have to model that for them. We talk about being reading role models, but we also have to be role models as lifelong learners for them, so that they can see that we're doing it too.
Yeah, you often say, yes, I've been teaching. In my case, I've been teaching 25 years. But I've not been teaching. I mean, that's the number of years I've been teaching, but not the number of times that I've taught the same thing in the same way over and over and over again. You say it better than I do.
Have we taught 25 years, or have we taught 1 year 25 times? 25 times.
Mm-hmm. I knew you could put the phrase together for me. And that's true. And I think that one of the reasons we don't burn out, and that we, continue to look at new challenges for ourselves, is because we are saying, I'm not going to teach the same as I did before. I can do it. I can do it better. I can do it differently. I can take some of this new stuff and infuse it. It took me a long time to get around to giving kids more choice at the graduate level. I'm really ashamed to say, but I think it's a good thing.
Well, because we're also talking about negotiated choice. It's not a free for all, and we just think kids should get to do whatever they want, and students should just have complete and total freedom. I mean, that's unschooling. That's not schooling in the way that we traditionally define it. But I think that's one of the things I love about Twitter and some of the other social media. Well, our favorite tool like that these days is Voxer, of course. I don't know how many people are using Voxer if you've not heard about it, but after the chat, go look it up. Voxer is a really fun app that allows you to make walkie-talkie messages. You don't have to call someone's phone, but you can make groups in Voxer, and that's what some of us have done. And I know that Teri and I belong to a Voxer group that we listen to every single day, and it's all people who are asking a lot of the same questions you are, the same kind of conversations that I see take place on Twitter a lot, as far as sharing of resources, sharing of ideas. That's one of the things that I think I love the most about social media, even though it certainly has its flaws and its downside, is that it's able to bring like-minded people together to ask questions, seek answers, and learn together without gatekeepers. We don't have to ask anyone's permission to be able to interact in those learning communities. It's also great pajama PD. We can go join a chat on Twitter in our PJs and nobody knows that we're just hanging out, in our yoga pants, getting some professional learning. I think that access makes social media fascinating for teachers. And I don't expect everyone to have a Twitter account, a Pinterest page, an Instagram account, a Facebook page, but I think finding one thing that you feel comfortable with, that you're willing to curate and cultivate and feed, can really be an enhancement to professional learning.
I love the idea of, I won't call it instant professional development, because it does take some time to put some of this together, especially the Twitter chats. Title Talk doesn't just happen on a whim.
You say that. You say that. You don't know how often Colby and I call each other like Friday and go, hey, what's our topic for Title Talk this month? I don't know. When was the last time we talked about?
Put together well to begin with. Okay. You're allowed, and I'm occasionally the one who writes this. So my kids are joining in this weekend, and what are you going to talk about? Kind of thing. But it's purposeful. I mean, it is, and it's open, and it's a discussion. And there's some people who will dominate from time to time, but that doesn't change, I think, as the topic changes. And if you need, if you and I think sometimes look and we perceive that there's a need, that's what then says, okay, here's what our next Twitter chat needs to look like. Here are some things we need to start developing for professional development. And it's free. It is in your own home and pajamas, which is kind of nice. Even though you can't see me, I am dressed comfortably. I did have a cool T-shirt on to show y'all, but that will have to wait for another time. I'll take a picture and post it somewhere. But I mean, it is this idea that we can help one another, that we can talk to one another, and not that, I hate to say it this way, but it's how it's coming out. Walls divide us. I know that occasionally people won't approach you, Donalyn, or won't approach me because, you're Donalyn Miller, you're the book whisperer. And yet we're eminently approachable. And I think social media breaks down that barrier beautifully, because I'm Professor Nana and you're Donalyn Books. And so you can just kind of, send us your questions, send us your opinions, and we join in as one of you. And I love that.
Well,
I think that's really cool.
As a crazy all things fangirl person myself, I love that I can ask Penny Kittle a question on Twitter and she will ask me. I mean, I will admit I do have her phone number, but there's just something about being able to do that. Or Judy Bloom. I do not have Judy Bloom's phone number, but if I send Judy Bloom a tweet, she will respond to my students and me. I mean, that's pretty exciting to think that, yes, there's a lot about digital citizenship that I wish both children and adults knew. And I think we're still exploring the boundaries of a lot of those things and setting up social norms that should be followed. But the idea that we have that access in ways that we never had before is pretty exciting. The very first initiative that I ever really started on Twitter was Book a Day. And it's almost time for Book a Day again, that crazy challenge where I plan to read a book every single day of summer vacation. And, I'm already starting to think about that. Like, what are some of the books I might want to read? How am I going to catch up on journals? Hey, Teri, let's not forget to let everybody know that we have a great book list that we're going to share for all the members of the chat. Teri and I created a list of some of our favorite books that have come out so far this year, and we'll share that with everyone at the end of the chat, and you'll be able to access that. Now, that does not mean it's a definitive list, because lists are by nature subjective, and of course we're still reading. So if Teri and I made that list tomorrow, we'd probably add 2 more books to it, but it might give you a good place to start, and you might find it validating too to see that some of our favorite picks this year are some of yours as well.
Exactly. When we put lists together, we agonize sometimes about, oh my gosh, I read a book today, it needs to go on that list now. We can do that when we've got weeks of stuff to keep adding to things. But lists are kind of like, I want to say they're like test scores. It's a snapshot of where I am as a reader right now. It's not where I'm going to be in another couple of weeks. It's not where I was in January. But it's, here are the books that I can think of right now that I think are ones that I had to narrow down. These are the ones that I would do.
Well, we've talked before about how the art of making a book recommendation, when to me, we talk a lot about authentic response with kids. How do we want kids to respond to what they read? We still do with a lot of things like I did this in my own classroom, kids blogging, kids writing reviews, and those are all valid forms of authentic response. But we have to admit to ourselves that most readers don't go on Goodreads and write a review. Most readers do not write a blog post, and God forbid, most readers do not make a diorama to share their reading responses. And so recommendations to me are the purest form of reading response, because when you're recommending a book to another reader, you're not just filtering everything you know about books. If you and I read hundreds of books a year, we're not putting hundreds of books a year in a presentation. We're not writing deep reviews of, hundreds of books. Well, you probably are, but you're a machine. Anyway, but I'm not. And, but what happens is that book recommending becomes a way of responding to what I read. Because if I read so much, how am I lifting up certain books and sharing them? And what's interesting is those lists that we make, those are broad brush lists. We're sharing books that we believe a lot of people will enjoy. But, it's different when you're making book recommendations to your personal students or to friends or to family members, because when I make a book recommendation to you, number one, it's rare that I mention a book to you that you've not heard about. But I don't just filter everything I know about books through that recommendation. I filter what I know about you. And I'm sure you do the same. It's just like when we're in the classroom making recommendations to our students. At the beginning of the school year, we have those tried and true books that are in our toolboxes that we're always going to recommend at the beginning of the year when we don't know our students that well. For my 6th grade students, some of those books might have been Hatchet or The Lightning Thief or Out of My Mind or One for the Murphys. Those are books that I know resonate with a lot of kids. But as the year goes on and I learn more about each individual child, their reading abilities, their reading experiences, their interests, my book recommendations become, I finesse them. They become more targeted to that individual child. The process of making book recommendations really fascinates me.
Well, I think so. And I know that you have this experience as well. Somebody will tweet you or email you and say, I need good books for 4th grade. And our immediate response to them is, so tell me more. Because while you and I are happy to stop people in bookstores and make recommendations of books. I know that. We do that. We do it in exhibit halls. We do it on our Voxer. We love recommending books, but that's because we know one another really well. When it comes to I need some books for a 4th grader, I want to say, tell me more about the 4th grader. Tell me the last great book that this 4th grader read, and let me try to pick up on a thread there. I'm trying not, when I do a presentation, it's a little different. I'm just throwing out tons of titles, hoping that you'll pick up the 2 or 3 you like as a teacher, as a librarian. But when we're talking kids, I'd like it to be a little more targeted.
Well, and the way that you become good at recommending books to your students is by reading a lot of books that your students might read. And I don't mean that should be our whole reading lives, but clearly reading. If we're literacy professionals, then we have to embrace that aspect of literacy that belongs to us personally. There needs to be something. we need to be readers and writers ourselves, or how are we going to engage kids with reading and writing? I just feel like this is a fundamental question. Sometimes when I'm asked questions, my first thought is, I talk to librarians a lot, and they say, I just really have trouble getting teachers to connect their kids with books. And I would say, well, the teachers need to read some of them. And that doesn't mean that we're not reading. Like, I'm listening to Girl on the Train right now on audio, and it's fantastic. And it's certainly an adult bestseller. And I read professional books. I know you and I try to read at least one professional book a month. We're always reading our journals. So my whole reading life isn't children's and young adult literature. It's just, that's probably the one that I share the most publicly. But we need to know a little bit about the types of books we want to put in front of our kids to read. In the same way that I would expect my daughter's voice lesson teacher for choir or her driver's ed instructor to have deep knowledge of how to sing, how to read music, how to drive a car, safety rules. Literacy professionals need to have a deep knowledge of not just classic, but contemporary literature and books that might resonate with their kids. It just seems fundamental to me.
Well, and you and I had said almost jokingly at one point during some conversation about, 10 tips for teachers becoming role models. And number one was read, then read for number two, and then read some more for number three. And number four was read more widely. And just kind of going down and saying, read, because ultimately, the more we read, the more widely we read, the more deeply we read, the better we are in terms of connecting kids to books and becoming that reading role model. I read about reading role models recently. I just think they're incredibly important, and yet sometimes we forget that kids are looking to us. And if we don't know, good books to recommend, they tend to go to other sources where they may or may not find success. I would hope that they would find a lot of success with us, with their librarians. I include those with teachers because that's where I do most of my work now. And I know that I graduated from an undergrad program knowing how to teach one book, that was Huckleberry Finn. And my first classroom, I was the only non-African American in the room, and I thought, I can't do Huckleberry Finn. I need to know more. I need to know more books to share with these kids, and that began kind of a lifelong search, for those good books to share with kids. And I think it's really important to kind of read widely and set aside time each and every day for what's important for us. And in this case, for me, it's reading, and I know you do the same thing.
And writing too.
Absolutely.
I don't want to interrupt because you guys are definitely on a roll here. But we may not be. Is Teri still talking?
Sense of A.S. King and Andrew Smith and those.
She's on a roll.
Absolutely gorgeous. But we are writers, and we do write. I know you write every day, so do I. It just looks the form the writing takes may be very different. You and I jotted down notes today when we were talking. I jotted down some notes for previews that I have to write tomorrow, and I blogged. So I've done 3 different kinds of writing today, and it's just become part of what I do. I'm sure if I were to think back on my day, I probably did some other kind of writing I've just dismissed.
Tweeting, Facebook posts. I saw those. Emails. I think I saw all of those.
You bet. Yeah, response for students' work. All that kind of stuff. And we do that. And we need to make sure that kids see that. And if I were going to give advice to parents, because I know that was one of the things we talked about making sure we mentioned today, it would be that too, that parents need to serve as role models as well. Hopefully reading, hopefully kids seeing the right things. And that parents need to allow their kids choice in books. And Donalyn, you mentioned a couple other things that I think are critical for parents.
Okay. I think our moderator wanted to chime in for just a minute.
No, we have a couple minutes. We wanted to do a lightning round where you guys just share as many quick tips as you can for the next 5 to 10 minutes. So if you want to start, Donalyn.
So number one, befriend a librarian. Let me say that again. Befriend a librarian. Librarians know things. They are happy to share some of those things with you. They can't give away all their secret librarian knowledge, but they'd be happy to share most of it. Librarians are an untapped resource in the conversation. And traveling around the country, it disheartens me quite a bit that we are losing so many of our school librarians. They're vital to the literacy programs at a school. I really feel like the school library is the hub of literacy at a school. For somehow, in the same way that the readers have gotten this stereotype of being bookworms and bookish loners, we have labeled our librarians as just people who only check out books, or now they're forced into this role of having to be technology specialists with reading on the side. And I just think we're not valuing our librarians enough. And that goes for teachers, that goes for administrators, that goes for parents. Building a connection with parents and the public library, I think, is a wonderful opportunity. Many public libraries have programs over the summer for students. They have education programs for parents, language courses, tax help. They're an incredible resource, research help. And many public libraries have resources that we just don't have at a school. So encouraging our parents to go to the public library, facilitating those introductions in the ways that we can, partnering with our public libraries, and also building up the relationships between the school librarian and the stakeholders at a school. It's just a vital resource. You can see the difference when you walk into a school that has a robust program and a rockin' librarian. You just can. It's tangible. So that's really two things.
Yeah, not only is it tangible, Donalyn, but if you look at the research that's been done, and that's my job. I'm a professor, so I'm going to just chime in and say research.
Well, Keith Curry Lance.
There's been the Lance study, which has been replicated in like 36 states, that shows that the presence of a certified librarian with a good collection helps to increase test scores within the school. And when that librarian is removed, there is a drop in test scores. And I wish more people kind of pushed that to administrators and said, this is one of the reasons. Now, granted, test scores are not the be-all and end-all, but if we can show a correlation between having that rocking librarian and a bunch of books and the fact that kids read more and do better on tests, I think that's a great thing to have.
And not just tests in language arts either. Not just reading and writing tests across the board. That's
right. And Donalyn we had talked earlier about the importance of a library card. And, we have personal stories. I'm sure lots of people do. I remember getting my library card. I remember when the person I now call College Girl got her library card. She could not get her own until she was 5. And the day she turned 5, we went to the library so she could get her own card.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a rite of passage. It was a driver's license kind of cachet for her. But having the good school library helps eliminate some of the problems with kids who don't have access to books at home.
Mm-hmm.
Because checking things out of a library gives you temporary, but ownership for that to read however many weeks you're allowed to have it. So having that is just critical. If parents can support book fairs at school by giving kids, a few bucks to go and get a book, again, that ownership issue is just so incredibly important. And we know that, buying books at a book fair is something that people 20 years, looking as adults, looking back on their childhood, say, that was so important to me. We've got research that says that's one of the factors that they became a reader. Being read aloud to, buying books in a book fair, having somebody, show interest in their reading. Those are just such critical elements.
Well, and what I love also is that a lot of and we only have time for one or two more tips before we have to move on, but the role of choice, I think, is also sticky. And by sticky, I think it means, it transfers to both a home and school setting. That idea of giving kids some choice and autonomy over what they read. If we want kids to take ownership of reading, we have to allow them some opportunity to select the books that they read. And that means that, you know, their personal goals for reading matter just as much as their academic goals. We want students to have a positive reading identity. They're not going to develop that if all their choices are made. Brian Camborne has said this in his research on choice, that people who lose choices become disempowered. That's not just children, that's adults too. Even the perception of choice is powerful to us. And I think that's one thing we can communicate to parents. Some parents feel that their children need to be reading more rigorous books, that if children are reading hard books, it makes them better readers. We can really educate our parents in this way. You know, I quote Penny Kittle in this regard. She says, just because we're assigning rigorous books doesn't mean children are reading rigorous books. And if we want kids to be engaged, we have to give them something that validates their interests, their personalities, their prior reading experiences.
And here's where I think reading widely helps us too, because we can say, you know, there are plenty of complex books out there that don't appear to be complex. You know, it's easy to dismiss a picture book and say that can't possibly be something that kids will gain anything from other than just sheer pleasure. And yet, if you read widely enough, you can see that there are picture books out there that provide incredibly complex reading experiences for kids without kind of defeating them along the way. And the same is true with YA, middle grade novels, things like that.
Well, you know, we just have to say over and over again, picture books, graphic novels are formats of storytelling. They don't designate or dictate an age of reader. And there are quite a few picture books that I know my middle school students have loved over the years. And, you know, sometimes people see that as compromise reading, things like graphic novels. They don't understand that there's so much rich storytelling going on in those formats that we would be missing out on some incredible storytelling experiences, some incredible reading and sharing experiences if we just completely remove an entire format of book from our classrooms or from our homes.
Well, if you look at the book list that we've provided for this hangout and look at the picture books, the nonfiction picture books, as well as the fiction picture books, these are incredibly rich reading experiences, and I think represent to some degree the incredible variety that's out there, the incredible richness that's out there before we even get up into graphic novels and middle grade fiction and finally, you know, young adult fiction and nonfiction. I know I say this to Donalyn constantly. She must get tired of hearing it, but it's such a good time to be in this field. I love teaching children's and YA Lit because every time I turn around, there's something that just takes my breath away from how it's constructed. Donalyn's reading one right now that I floated onto her, the new Patrick Ness, or the forthcoming Patrick Ness, that just blows my mind at how it's constructed. It defies description. And, you know,
we think about,
I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
So when people say that's written for kids, I want to say, no, not really. Because I pull from that as a 62-year-old reading young adult literature. I am able to pull from that. It's a great time to be in this field and to see the variety, the richness that's out there for us.
Well, if you're a book person and you're a reading and writing person, you're always seeking what's extraordinary, what's exciting, what's surprising to you. And to me, some of the best writing that is happening today is in children's and young adult literature. So why would a reader want to miss out on whole swaths of incredible reading experiences? You know, you think about a book like Laura Ruby's Bone Gap that we're all just completely in love with. And I don't think anyone would read that and not just say, this is an incredible piece of writing. It doesn't matter who the target audience is. We can stand back in awe at the talent behind something like that. You know, you think about Jason Reynolds and Boy in the Black Suit. I mean, I challenge any adult to read that book and not walk away with just tear-stained cheeks and dazzled at the power of his storytelling. So why would a reader or a writer want to miss out on those incredible experiences? It's what we love about reading and writing. So we shouldn't narrow our reading lives. Really, we would be missing out. There I go again, worrying about missing out. But maybe that should be my epitaph. She did not miss out. That's what it should say.
She didn't get to that last book.
Oh, I'll never finish them all.
I know, I never will finish them all either. And that's a nice position to be in.
Yeah,
it truly is. So summer reading. Did we say anything about summer reading? Because we probably need to.
Well, actually,
wait, it's almost time for questions too, Teri.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we did get several questions, and I am hoping that we can squeeze a few in before we have to wrap up. And one of them is about summer reading.
Oh, good.
Teri Harpster she wants to know if you have tips to keep students reading throughout the summer.
Well, we just, Colby Sharp and I just hosted our monthly Title Talk chat, which we always have on the last Sunday of the month. And the archives for that chat are available online on our Title Talk website. And our topic was summer reading. And we received so many incredible responses from teachers and librarians about what they were doing at their schools. I think some general things that came out of it was really talking up books and reading starting now as a way to get kids excited about the summer, helping students create lists of specific books that they would be interested in reading. That takes that abstract plan of, oh yeah, I need to read over the summer, and makes it more concrete for kids when they have specific books that they would like. It also means that as teachers and librarians, we can help find those books for kids, even consider how we might check out books. One librarian that I talked to actually checked out 10 books to every child before school closed for the summer, and then the kids were able to keep those books. That's the key piece of summer reading about which we need to be concerned, is access. Wishes don't mean anything if the kids don't actually have books to read or access to books. And, most of our students, particularly our students with less resources, their primary book access is going to be at school, from the school library and from the classroom library. So how can we as a school community ensure that our kids have access to 10 books over the summer? That they have some books that they've self-selected that they're interested in reading is what we need to be concerned with. As far as making sure they read over the summer, we have to recognize we have influence, but no control over that. What we can do is set them up for success, encourage the choices, have kids make lists, ensure that they have access or a way to get books over the summer that's reasonable for them. Things like student created podcasts, maybe doing Google Docs, talking to parents. Scholastic issued their Kids and Family Reading Report in January, and one of the questions that they asked parents was, what are some of the challenges that parents had in being able to engage their children with reading at home? And one of the number one things parents said was they didn't know what books were available for their children to read. So some of these lists that we might be creating at a school community could certainly be shared with parents so that we can support them. This is why we see parents go into a big box bookstore and they buy Treasure Island for a fourth grader. It's because they don't know what other types of books they're available for their kids to read. So we can support parents with some of those lists and recommendations also.
Well, and I just finished, and it will be out in a couple weeks, an article for Knowledge Quest, which is a librarian journal, but it should be available. You should be able to pull it up online. It's called Summertime and the Reading is Required, because there are too many cases of folks saying you need to read one of the 5 books here if you're going to be a 9th grader, one of the 4 books here if you're going to be a 3rd grader. We need to move away from that because that's still not enough choice. I've seen wonderful programs where the choice is much broader and where suggestions and recommendations are made if you want them, and where if you want to respond to the book in some way or report on the book in some way, you can, but it's not required. We need to bear in mind that, we want summer reading. I love my summer reading. I read about it recently. My friend Lois Buckland and I would get in our backyard pool in our floating lounge chairs with our books, and we would float in the sun. I understand how bad that was now. But we would float all day and read. And it was just incredible. And it was just stuff we wanted to read. Sometimes it was challenging and complex and rigorous, and sometimes it was just, trash. I'll just be honest. We do read trash every once in a while. It's kind of fun to do that.
So do we have time for another question?
We do. There was a lot of questions, but I don't think we're going to have the opportunity to get through all of them. But let's, Amanda Palmer, 131. She says she's seeing education grads not having a basis in best practice in ELA, and she wants to know how we can fix that.
Well, before or after they graduate would be my question, because I don't know that I think that commitment to professional learning is what we really need to instill in our pre-service teachers, and providing them with those resources so they can continue to learn and grow after they graduate. So how are we introducing our pre-service teachers to social media as a professional development tool? How are we introducing them to professional development authors who are not writing textbooks, but are perhaps writing books for professional book development books for teachers around practice that includes best practices? How are we connecting our pre-service teachers with that expectation that they need to continue to be lifelong learners after they graduate? There's a mindset piece there that we need to ensure that our graduates have, because you're not going to learn everything you need to know before you walk into a classroom, because no matter how much you think you know, those kids show up. And then, you suddenly realize you don't know anything. So, and that happens to every teacher who's reflective every single year he or she teaches. The new kids show up and suddenly you don't know some things. So I think it's instilling that mindset and cultivating that mindset in our pre-service teachers is almost more important than any individual piece of information we could instill.
Another question, I'm just aware that time is fleeting, so I want to try to answer some more.
Okay, do you want to stick around for one more question?
Let's do it.
Yeah,
okay. Lit coach Jackie W. wants to know, how do we motivate high school students to read independently and be excited about SSR? Teri, do you want to take that one?
Are you talking about me? Okay.
Yeah, I'm waiting. I want to hear your answer.
Well, and of course, so high school kids, SSR, is that what I heard? I remember I'm listening through a phone. So,
yeah. How do we engage high school kids?
Okay. Again, time. We just have to give kids time. We have to be the model. We have to go slowly and kind of build up. I hate to use the word stamina, but that's what it is. To build up that stamina. But we do need to build it into the day. There's absolutely not a shred of evidence anywhere that says independent reading practice, if you want to look at it that way, does anything but help, but improve. Not just test scores, not just vocabulary, although that's all there. The other piece of it is attitude toward books and reading. Eons ago, so I want to say probably 25 years ago, Connie Epstein contacted all the Ivy League universities and asked, what books do you want kids having read when they come to you? That's early college ready, let's call it that. And she got hundreds of answers, and there were only two things that appeared on more than one list. One was Huckleberry Finn, which is fascinating, and the other was any play by Shakespeare. And she was just kind of amazed that there wasn't more of a coalescence in terms of what they wanted kids. But one professor wrote, send us kids who love to read, we'll take care of the rest. Assign grades for reading by the pound. And I mean, that image stays with me 25 years after I read the research, that if we send kids out to the next grade, to the next level, wherever, who love to read, then the next person can pick it up from there. And, if we really did reward reading by the pound, it wasn't how thick your book was, but how many pages you totaled out, or, how many books you read. But if we do that and we keep kids excited about books and reading, we really won a huge battle.
Well, it's the same pillars over and over again, isn't it? And it doesn't matter what age the reader is. That's the one thing we have to reinforce. That it doesn't matter if you're an adult or a high school student or a middle school student or a kindergartner or a 3-year-old. It's time to read or be read to, access to books and reading materials, choice in what you read and under what conditions you read it, opportunity to respond and share, book talks, response letters, whatever, how that looks. I think book talks are the secret sauce in getting kids to read. You know, teachers doing regular book talks, librarians doing regular book talks, and most important, kids doing book talks with each other gets kids excited about reading. So time, access, choice, response, modeling. You know, all the stakeholders in the game need to be modeling literate lives for themselves.
We all need to have, I'm going to add one more to that. We all need to have a community to which we belong. And actually, we need to have many communities. Donalyn and I are part of a vibrant community on Voxer, but there are other communities that we belong to as well that support us, that recommend books to us, that will say, oh, have you read this article? And it's more than just our personal learning network. It truly is a community of learners. And it's the stuff that keeps me going day after day after day. And thinking, I love what I do. I love what I'm able to talk about. It's just an exciting time.
Isn't it great that our passion is also our vocation? We are so lucky.
Yep.
Okay, well, if it's okay, I think we're going to start wrapping this up because we've gone a little bit late. We do have one more announcement before we sign off and say goodbye, and that is the book giveaway. We had several hundred people enter the book giveaway contest, but only one person is going to walk away. Well, not walk away, but be shipped copies of Reading Ladders and Reading in the Wild. And I'm just going to generate a random number. And the winner is Barbara Cotter, Twitter hashtag @BCCotter. So Barbara, congratulations.
Congratulations.
If you want to send ILA a direct message, we will be in touch with you and you can let us know where to send your books. And besides that, I would just really like to thank Donalyn and Teri. Teri, I'm so sorry you couldn't be with us virtually tonight, but I'm glad that we had this cell phone and it worked out. But I'm really, really grateful for you guys, and I know everybody else who is watching for spending that last hour with us. And for everybody who is watching live, thank you to you. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. We will be having a Google Hangout from St. Louis at ILA 15. We're going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at how our conference is set up and show you everything that you don't want to miss, including Donalyn Miller. So please join us on Thursday, July 16th. It'll be 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time. So we will see you next time.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Sorry I didn't get to see everybody.